In this lesson, you'll learn how to open and combine images while gaining an understanding of image resolution and file size. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm selecting File, Browse and Bridge, and I'm going out to the desktop. So you can see over in Favorites, I can click on Desktop and locate the PS04 Lessons folder that I copied off the DVD. And the first thing I'm going to do is open up the PS04 Done file. Now this is what you're going to create. It's not the best looking composite, but it's going to get you up and running and understanding the basic functionality of moving images around and creating composites. As you go throughout the book and the additional lessons, you'll find improved ways for doing a lot of the things that you're just learning the basics of in this lesson. So you'll see that I can go over to my Layers panel and I can click off and on a cow. It's on an individual layer, and you're going to start to create this lesson on your own. So first of all, let me go ahead and close this. You can keep it open for reference if you want, but I want to go back. Don't save. I want to go back into Browse and Bridge, and I want you to click on PS0401 and then shift click to select 02 and 03. You can either double click on any of these items or control click if you're on the Mac, or right click and select to open with and select any application that you want. In this case, Photoshop CS6 is the default. So all three of these images open. And I can select the tab to go back to PS0401 and see the barn. Now the first thing I want to show you is that down in the lower left-hand corner, if I click where it says Doc 1.37/1.37, that if I click down here, I get information about this image, about the width and the height, the channels, RGB, and the resolution of this image. Now keep in mind a couple things here. One is that this dock size is the same on both sides of that slash right now because no layers have been added. But as I add layers, you'll see that that right side becomes larger because it's taking up more memory as I create that layered file. On the left side, that value will be smaller because it's representing the flattened image. Now, why do I have you looking at the resolution here? Because one of the most fundamental things you must realize is that if you're creating composites, you really have to pay attention to the pixel size of your images when you bring one image into another. So I see that this is 885 pixels. If I come up to the tab and I click on PS0402 and I come down and I check the size of this image, I see that this rooster is 705 pixels, almost the exact same width, maybe 100 pixels smaller than the barn. Which means that if I move this rooster over into the barn, it's going to be monster rooster. So by looking at this, I can say, I need that rooster to be a little bit smaller. What I'm going to do is go up to image size. Here I can change the size. If I type in 200 pixels, you'll see that the proportions are linked. So the width and height change together. And when I click OK, the image becomes a little smaller. Now what I'm going to do to get this image of this rooster over into the barn is simply copy and paste to start. So you'll see that I can press Command A or Control A if I'm on the PC. I can press Command C on the Mac again to copy, or Control C on the PC. Click back on the tab for 0401 and press Command or Control V. If you prefer not to use keyboard shortcuts, you can also use the Edit menu. And here is my rooster. Now I'm switching to the Move tool. The Move tool allows me to drag this item around. And notice that when you cut and paste items, they automatically become layers. Layers act as independent items that can be moved separately. Now, another way that I can move an image is by clicking up on the tab. So I'm selecting PS0403, the cow. And notice that if I have the Move tool, I can grab the cow and I can drag it right up to the tab for PS0401. And when that image comes forward, I can bring the cow down and release. That's a big cow. I can transform this cow right here, though, to make it a little bit smaller. I prefer to use keyboard shortcuts, so I'm pressing Command-T on the Mac. If you're on the PC, press Control-T, and you'll see handlebars appear automatically. You'll also see that my options panel has changed, and I have the choice of coming up here and selecting a width and height if I want, or I can grab these handles and I can just visually change the size of this cow, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm holding down the Shift key and grabbing a corner and sliding the cow down so it's a more reasonable size. And you can just visually pick any size that you want. But when I'm done, I either need to hit the return or enter key or this little checkbox up here for committing that size. I'm still on the move tool. I'm going to move the cow over. Now there's lots of ways of removing the background. I typically like to use masks, and you're going to find out about masks throughout the rest of this book. But for right now, I'm going to give you a down and dirty, easy way of removing backgrounds. And that is by going to my eraser tool and selecting the Hidden Magic Eraser tool. And if I take this tool and click outside the cow, the background goes immediately. Now what also happens is that a little bit of the cow went too. Keep in mind that when you do this, the tolerance is set up for 32 to begin with, which means 32 shades of the color that I'm clicking on. 32 out of 256. I'm going to press Command-Z or Control-Z if you're on the PC. I'm going to bring this value down to maybe a 20 tolerance. And then click on that white again, and you'll see that the back of the cow has now remained. I can't do this to the rooster because that layer is not selected. But if I click on the layer and then click on the white background, I can also get rid of that background as well. So I told you that was a cheap, down and dirty way of removing the background, which is okay for quick web graphics and that sort of thing, but I'll be showing you lots of better selection tools later. What I do want you to see, though, is that even though it's a quick way of removing the background, you probably don't want some of the items that you see in here remaining. So I'm holding down my space bar, and I'm also holding down my Command key. I'm on the Mac right now, but if you're on the PC, you would hold down space bar and Control key. And I'm clicking and dragging a little bit closer to that rooster to see that there's a little bit of the white edge of that background still here. I'm making sure that that layer is selected. And in fact, just to make it easier for you to see everything, I'm double clicking on layer 1 and naming this rooster. Double click on layer 2 and naming it cow, and then going back to the rooster. So I have rooster layer selected. I'm going to layer all the way down to the bottom to something called matting, and I'm selecting defringe and leaving it at 1 pixel and clicking OK. And you'll see that that edge disappears and it gets blended in with the background a little bit better. You don't really have to change that to anything more than 1 pixel. So if I go to the cow and I also select matting defringe, you can see that that removes that little bit of a matting or highlight color around the edge as well. Now I'm pressing Command-0 on the Mac or Control-0 on the PC so that you can see what I've done a little bit better. I'm going to do one more thing, and that is take my type tool, click once, and you'll see that now my type options appear up at the top. And before I even type, I'm going to select that I want a 72 point size for my text. I'm also clicking on the color up here, set the text color, and I'm selecting a light color, or I can even sample a color right out of my image by just clicking on a color in there and clicking OK. I'm typing in big red barn. Now, if I want to make text changes after I've already created this, I need to click and drag over just like you would in any other word processing application, because maybe I want to change this to be bold italic. Now I'm going to commit my text just like I did the transform by clicking on the check mark. And the next thing I'm going to do is in my layers panel, and I'm dragging out my layers panel by clicking on the tab so you can see it a little better. But while I have this layer active, I'm clicking on FX for a layer style, and I'm selecting stroke. I'm clicking on color as being red. Click OK. And then you can select your options. I'm going to leave mine at the default, but you can choose that the stroke is on the inside, the outside, the size, the opacity, anything else that you want to change, and click OK. So in this lesson, you got the basics of creating a composite to help you start working better in Photoshop.